Hi, it's Whitney Wiley, and thank you for joining me for Love Your Work. This is where we talk with our guests about doing the work they love and some of the lessons that they've learned along the way. And today I have with me Ashley Spurgeon, who's a coach and an author and a speaker. Ashley, how are you?
I am wonderful, Whitney. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for joining me and coming and talking about the work that you do and what you love about it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So why don't we start there? You're a coach and a consultant, but I know you are working with particular set of clients. You have a niche. What exactly is it that you're doing?
Well, currently I am gearing my coaching practice towards attorneys because attorneys, and it's also doctors, CPAs, people that are in the service industry, but they're dedicating their whole life to something very specific.
Okay.
And what they do is they go through and 10 years of of college, and it becomes their whole life.
Yes.
They have nothing outside of their life. Everywhere they go, they have their phone with them. Everywhere they go, they have a laptop with them. They do not know how to separate and have that work-life balance. So there's a very high divorce rate, strained parent-child relationships, things like that. And even within their own firm, these are type A personalities. So they don't know how to train up their staff properly so that they can hand over everything. I mean, my biggest example is, when an attorney or somebody goes on vacation, they still have their phone, they still have the laptop, and they can't separate.
Right.
And so they're really damaging their whole life. And they went to these careers and they invested so much in themselves to be able to have this amazing life, because we all know lawyers, doctors, CPAs, they make great money.
Right.
But
Right.
but then they have very damaged lives. They never get to have meals with their families, and even if they're home, they're still working. And it's just learning how to, because I'm a life purpose coach as well, and since I had so many years in corporate America, all the way from C-suite down, and then years with a law firm, teaching them how to grow their business and make more money, but yet have more time to live, so it's really a lot about that work-life balance that's so precarious for these professionals. I have one friend that she was a solo practitioner, and she worked herself so hard, she ended up with a brain tumor.
Oh, no.
So they work themselves to death. It's really hard. And so many of them, because of the status that they want to keep and the image they want to keep, they don't know how to reach out, and they don't know who to reach out to. And I was the whole front section of a law firm for so many years, and able to work with the attorneys and say, let's separate. When my boss went to Bali, and the whole time he was there, he was calling and emailing the law firm. Well, then he finally, a couple of years later, took a trip to Vietnam, and he knew, I was able to convince him and show him that his staff was such a cohesive unit, and they were so well trained that he does not have to call the office for the 7 days that he's in Vietnam.
Right.
And he was able to come back and feel refreshed, like he actually had a vacation.
Right. So that gives me like two thoughts about this. One is, you're talking about these professionals, they have and doctors and lawyers in particular have the highest incident rates of substance abuse, right? Drug abuse and alcohol abuse, because of the stress, and everything is so stressful for them. But the other thing that occurred to me is, and you're right, there is this the status symbol that goes along with that. And I think it's not just these professionals, others. There is, our society has created this, it's a myth, certainly, that being busy somehow is the thing, right? And so you're right. The need to have them take a step back is very important for their health. But the other part is a leadership piece, which not maybe for a solo a solo practitioner, but when you've got other staff or you are part of a firm or a medical practice, that you have got to become the kind of leader that you can trust the staff, that you've developed your staff, trained your staff in a way that you can trust them so that you can actually go off and enjoy your life. What's the point of all that work if you don't actually enjoy your life?
Yeah, and a lot of these people, they miss even the small things. When's the last time they went to their son's soccer game or their daughter's dance recital? You can't get those things back.
Right.
And, the one thing I learned, I've been a mom for 33 years now, that if you disappoint your kids learn at a very young age that you're a disappointing person.
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking as a parent. You don't want your kids to think that about you. You don't want, the only time you actually talk to your family is when you're calling from the office. One of the things I really, really stress very heavily is that everything starts at the top and it all trickles down in your law firm.
Yeah.
And so one thing that's really important is that these people that are at the top, and specifically I work with solopreneurs, boutique firms and small law firms, which is generally people, I guess considering a small law firm is 20 and less. I like to work with firms that are 10 or less, or maybe 15 or less. Because it's a whole really interesting dynamic that so many positions overlap and so many responsibilities overlap. So they really have to work as a family, because you spend more time in your job waking hours than you do at home with your own family. But anyway, it starts at the top. So one thing I really try to work with people is to really tap into what their passion was. Why did they come into this career in the first place? And when you know what your mission is and what your passion is and why you're doing what you're doing, then everybody that works below you, they all become champions for you. And, it's like I used to tell my boss all the time, I was his biggest fan. Well, that was a good thing because I'm the one that brought in the clients, because I spent the last 7 years at a bankruptcy law firm. And the one thing I really learned is that law is not just about handling cases and going to court and doing the paperwork and the research. We're helping people heal from tragedy and trauma. And of course, with my psychology degree, I pulled that in 100% with my marketing, and that everything's about hospitality. When you invite these clients into your office, you need to have the same attitude as if you just invited your favorite person into your home.
That is a good point.
Yeah, and so you have to be ready when they walk in to not be on your phone, not be on the computer. You're greeting them with open arms. You're providing them with something to drink. You're making them comfortable. And all of that sets the stage for how the clients are going to be receptive to the services offered. And it's hard because we're asking people in trauma and tragedy to spend thousands and thousands of dollars, but with it's all this huge giant circle, or people always talk about the onions. Well, this is the onion. You have to peel it down and make sure that each layer is ready, but it starts with the person on the top. And if they're not healthy, if they're not happy, if they don't have a balanced life or peace within themselves, they're not going to be making money.
Right. And then they create an environment that doesn't work for their staff, which can create, stress issues for them, health issues for them, or high turnover, which is another issue that happens in law firms in particular, is that this a revolving door because of the stress. And so I love that you're doing this. Tell me, what's your favorite part about your job, and what is it that you love about it?
I love the transformation. I love people to understand that they can have both sides. They can have the dream career and they can have a very, very successful personal life. And the neat thing is I've seen it over and over again. I've talked to people on the phone and I've seen them face to face, these people that they found that balance in these really high pressure, high expectation careers. I mean, you think, at least a good half of these people that went in these careers because their families expected them to be there. That's
Right.
what they were expected to do in their life. And then they get in there and they're like, oh my gosh, but I really wanted to be, in the Peace Corps helping people. Well, the thing they can realize, they're helping people. I don't know how many clients I'd sit there and I'd cry with them when they first came in, and I cried with them when their whole situation was resolved and they were starting their new lives.
Mm.
So, I actually found, I hated attorneys originally before I ever worked for one. I was terrified of them, and I'd had so many
You do
bad
know I'm an
experiences.
attorney, right, Ashley?
No, I didn't, but I was terrified of attorneys. And then I got to be in that position, and I saw what a beautiful thing we were doing for people. I mean, we saw the lives transform, not
Yeah.
only in the firm, but in all of our clients. And unfortunately, for me, my boss decided to retire. And, I was so happy for him because he'd been practicing law for 40 years, and COVID hit, and he's like, I think I'm going to retire. And I'm like, well, that's okay, because I'm coaching now anyway, and speaking and all that. And I said, so I could take everything that I learned. And I mean, it wasn't just with our firm, it was all the other firms that we were in communication
Right.
with.
Right.
And then, I wrote my book, The A+ Legal Office, and then, started working from there. And it's amazing to be able to still work with these people that had such a huge impact in my life, the attorneys and the CPAs and all that. And in a way, be back, and they gave, because in that huge period for, I think, I learned so much there.
So what is one of the challenges you have in the nature of your work, working with the attorneys in particular? When I was practicing
Mhm.
and working as a lawyer and a lobbyist, I was very cognizant about work-life balance or work-life harmony. It's like one of my highest values. But I would imagine that there's a challenge that you have with some of your clients or potential clients in helping them make the transition so that they can actually have the transformed life. What are some of the biggest challenges that you have with that?
One of the biggest challenges I have is that, especially with the men, they don't want to admit to themselves that things aren't going well, that
Hmm.
things aren't right,
Okay.
because they have such an image to uphold, and they've never really had anybody they could say, you know what, I'm really concerned about payroll this month. They're not able to say, I kind of feel like a failure this
So you
month.
give them a safe space for
Yeah,
expressing some of the things that they're feeling.
mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's with anybody in the top of an organization. I mean, even if you get a CEO or whatever company, it's very lonely at the top,
Yeah.
because you can't confide in those that are closest with you. Um, I mean, with lawyers and doctors and all that, they don't ever want to have to go to somebody, and sometimes they don't even confide in their own spouses and say, I'm concerned, I'm confused, I feel a little lost, I need some direction.
Right.
So it's the first step of drawing them out and saying, it's okay to have somebody to talk to. Everybody needs coaches. I mean, they're such a benefit to life. And it doesn't matter what you do. If you're a musician, if you're a dancer, if you're an actor, if you're a sports person, if you're an entrepreneur, whatever profession,
Right.
everybody needs somebody that's objective, that can see things from the outside, that can help them make a plan forward and help hold them accountable.
Yes. Yes.
And
And that's,
most of,
yeah,
yeah,
that's a
most,
good point, because a lot of people in I don't want to say ordinary people, but people who aren't in the kinds of professions where you kind of think of them having, a coach, don't ever think that, well, why would I have one?
hmm,
Of course, we think that with athletes, we think it with probably C-suite, you know,
yes.
professionals, but other levels of the organization often don't get that, or that it's not invested in. And certainly, at least
Yeah.
my experience with attorneys was that they didn't. Either there was a little something done inside the firm with a partner, but then you have partners who are driving, a particular business model. And so the coaching that they're doing isn't about making sure that their employees are healthy, right? That they come to work healthy
Yeah.
and whole, because the coaching they're providing is for you to be a better attorney, but you actually become a better attorney by being a whole and healthy human.
Exactly. And, I mean, it's all about with the employees, I go through everything from the kind of people to look for that would work best with your values and your mission for
Right.
your business, to the interview process, to, your team working as a whole. And, I love one of Richard Bronson's quotes. I'm in San Antonio in a hotel right now, so I don't have my book with me and it's in there, but it says something to the fact of, create a job that people love so much that that they're able to leave, but don't want to leave.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that concept.
And yeah, the other quote is not Richard Bronson. I don't know who said it, is that people don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses.
Yeah.
And that's really expensive and it's very hard, especially in the smaller law firms. If you have a gap, a void of a position, it affects everybody in that law firm to get somebody else in. And a lot of times you make a very bad choice because everybody's stressed out, burned out, overworked, because there has been a void and everybody's had to pick up the slack.
Right.
And, so I go a lot through that, that kind of information also. So it starts from your receptionist and it goes all the way up to the primary attorney, as to how everybody can work to be such a cohesive team that the attorney can actually step away for 5 to 7 days, take a breather, and know that everything is going to be fine in their firm, and they're not just surviving, they're thriving and being able to work less and make more. And when I first started my law firm, we had about 2 or 3 appointments scheduled for the next day. And we got to the point that we were booked 2 weeks out and having to turn people away or refer them elsewhere because we were so in demand. It was really nice to see my boss go from just an average small law firm. We had 7 people in our firm, to being a multi-million-dollar law firm by the time he retired. And that's the dream, and he's,
right.
Except for COVID, he gets to travel internationally. He has a beautiful home. He has the car that he wanted. He has a wonderful girlfriend. He has a good life. If he wants to go to an expensive restaurant, he can. He's not having to think, oh, I don't know what this is going to do to my finances this month.
Right.
And then I also have a lot that has to do with the solopreneur, because they don't hire staff. They don't have a staff. They're trying to do everything themselves. So we talk about ways that they can have help that isn't incredibly expensive to them. They don't have to always hire staff to have help. I mean, the world's international now, and there's so much remote work that can take unneeded tasks off of their shoulders.
Absolutely. And COVID has been a big eye-opener for that.
Yeah, and the nice thing is we were doing these things. I was already writing this book before COVID hit,
awesome.
Because one whole section I have is called Eliminate, Delegate, or Automate. And unlike all the other coaches I've met out there that work with attorneys and doctors, they're all marketing. But that was my other degree, was marketing, and I got my degree in marketing for the law firm. And so we do tap on that, but I'm doing so much more. To work with the whole person, because I didn't see anybody else out there that was working with the person.
I love that. So let's switch gears a little bit. And we've been talking about what you're currently doing, but I'm interested in knowing kind of your journey to getting here. What was the very first job you had that, say, wasn't a babysitting job? Maybe while you were still in high school?
Yeah, when I was 21 years old, I went to work at the corporate office of a company in Florida called Allied Tires. And that was at 21, I started out at the receptionist, and it became, worked all the way up to the personal assistant for their distribution center. So that was my first experience. I was thrown right in with the C-suite. And that was really great. You get to work with the big egos and the really task-minded type A personalities and all that. And so I started there at the very beginning,
what was one of the lessons that you learned in that job and that transition from receptionist to the personal assistant?
Um, well, you get to be a lot more personally involved with those people, instead of just answering the phone and taking messages, and really being able to bridge the balance between someone that's in a highly demanding, stressful position and the clients that they have to work with. So I always loved, my whole life has been about customer service. My first job when I was 16, I worked for after Burger King, I worked for a department store, and they just immediately put me on the phones. Everywhere I went, they put me in a place where I had direct communication and contact with clients, because I had this natural way of making people feel better, a calming kind of thing. So my whole life has gone on that route. And so eventually I ended up with the study of psychology, because I just love people. And I was trying to teach other people to see how they can love people too.
Right. That
It's
makes sense. What you are doing, you want for other people. And so, and I can see that in you. I've been, following you and the things that you write about. And I can see that about you, even though we haven't met in person.
yeah.
What was a lesson that you've learned? Let's say even in Burger King, what was in your customer service role? What was one of the early lessons that you learned?
The old adage that the customer's always right.
Mm-hmm.
That if you want to have a successful business, I mean, it's kind of an old cliche, but it's still right. No, the customer's not always right. We all know that back in the back of our minds. They may be completely wrong, but whoever's coming to you and forcing an issue is because they don't feel heard, most likely.
Right.
No matter what. And I mean, even there was a time I worked in collections, which was one of my hardest jobs I ever had. I did not like it at all, because we had to call people and say, I don't care what your financial situation is, you've got to pay this credit card. Where what I wanted to say is, you need the help of a good attorney and a therapist. But, because their lives were messed up. And, but it was always, I learned very early on that it's, sometimes we have to be empathetic. Most of the times we need to be empathetic and stop and listen to what they really are saying. They may not get their way, but they're going to leave being heard.
Right.
And that would resolve more than anything. And if you're not taking really good care of your clients and letting them know they've been heard, you're throwing a lot of money out the window. And I don't care
agree.
what kind of business you're in, you need to make money to succeed. And the money comes from the clients. And even if it's somebody that doesn't hire you, if you treat them really well and give them 30 seconds of your ear where they feel like they've been heard, they're going to refer other people to you.
Yes.
It's
one of my least favorite things is having to say to someone, I don't think you're hearing me. you're like, you're not listening. You're not listening to what I just said. So yes. Yeah.
Well, I know my experience with a lot of law firms and even doctors' offices is those girls in the front office are so busy that, I mean, they would answer the phone and they'd say law firm, and the whole time they're busy typing and they're not hearing what people are saying. And it's really, I work a lot with the front office staff, and I try with the paralegals, but it's a little bit more difficult because they have stacks and stacks of stuff on their desk. They're not ready for 10,000 new clients, but you want to keep bringing people in, and it's just how to slow down enough to carry the conversation, to direct it the way it needs to go so that the client feels cared for. And, I don't know how many people decided to hire us, even 3-6 months later, a year later, because we reached out just to say, how are you doing?
So what are some of the other significant jobs that you've held during your career?
My boss used to tease me. He's like, what haven't you done? And I said, well, I haven't been a lawyer. I I haven't been a lawyer and I haven't been a doctor. Actually, I went through a divorce when I was 40 and I had a choice. I decided I was going back to school. Do I want to practice law or do I want to go into counseling and psychology? So I chose the psychology because that's more in line with my heart. At the time, I thought that attorneys were all just, money grabbing, hungry people and they didn't have a heart. Of course, I found a huge difference later. I found out that most of them have a huge heart. But,
which is probably why so many of them struggle and have that the problems with the substance abuse and family problems, right? Because they are so committed to the practice of law, to their clients, that it overtakes sometimes, maybe the better judgment of, I need to put this down and take care of my personal life.
But they don't really see where they can do either or. It's
right.
Either or, one or the other. They don't know how to structure their time and their priorities and everything so that they can free up enough time to do those things. But for myself, when I got my degree in psychology, I also got certified with the American Association of Christian Counselors. And for a while, I worked in women's ministry, grief counseling, and addictions. And so when I lived in Tennessee, I also ran a male residential drug and alcohol rehab center, which was probably one of the biggest challenges of my life because I'm 5'4", and some of these guys were, alcoholics and meth addicts at 6'5", But so I've done a lot of varied things. I had a web design and hosting company on my own for 10 years that went from one coast to the other. That was so long ago, but so I got to do a lot of that. I built sites for like nonprofits and hobbyists and things like that. What else have I done? I've done everything. I loved waiting tables. I went in one year. I was with my first husband, and my kids had just were all in school, and my husband worked days, and I said, I'll get a night job. Call her out, and he do for you. I want to be a grave digger. It's like, well, nobody ever asks to do that. And he said, why would you want to do that? I said, because I haven't. I've never done this before. And
I like that attitude. That's a great attitude.
I had so much fun because we get the after bar crowd. We had the police officers that would come in during the at night to eat. And I mean, just all the stories that you hear and the friendships that you make during that quieter shift. And I was like, I want to do it just because it's something I haven't done. I had a cleaning company in 3 different locations that I lived in. I had one in Naples, one in Port Charlotte, Florida, and when I was in one other location, I can't even remember. And so mostly I worked with senior citizens. And it was wonderful because I was a young mom, and they taught me their old tricks, how to cook and how to clean. And
wow.
it was amazing because it's always been service. I always undercharged everybody, but I learned so much from them, the difference, especially with the elderly, the difference between people that had a plan, a purpose, and a direction, and those people that just retired and didn't know what to do with their lives. Right. And I really saw a big difference of focus in how their lives turned out if they had a plan or if they did not.
It makes a huge, huge difference. So obviously your clients are very blessed to have you helping them to find the balance, the harmony in their lives, find some peace, and I can see the passion that you bring to it. So I want to wrap this up a little bit and just talk about, if you had one piece of advice that you could give to someone, let's say was starting new, fresh in a career of coaching, what piece of advice would you give them?
I would tell them to ask everybody they know, what is the one thing they ever talk about that lights them up? Mm. And when they see what that one thing is that just brings light to their eye and they start talking with passion, there's their niche. Those are the people that they can best serve. When I left the law firm, I was tired. I mean, I slept for 7 days straight. I was burned out. I'm like, okay, I don't want to even think legal for a long time. And everybody told me, they'd hear me talk and they'd be like, but you're so good at this. These people, you have such a heart for these people.
Right.
And, so I started to see that, I really do. I really understand where they're at and how they're feeling and where they can be even better, what they can have. And so I always encourage people, don't just go with what looks popular out there and what everybody else is doing, because that market's already flooded anyway. Where is your heart? What lights you up and makes you excited when you talk about it?
And that certainly makes sense, right? If you're going to be a coach and you're helping people to do that in their life, you should be doing that in your life as well.
Yeah. The second advice I always have for new coaches is it's imperative. Get your own coach.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't try to make it on your own. It will take you 10 years what you could do in 6 months to a year if you have a coach.
That makes so much sense. And
yes,
and I do several.
I do too. I do too.
So Ashley, I want to thank you again for stopping in and joining me here on Love Your Work. You are a delight to talk to, and I loved hearing about your experience and how you're helping, particularly in the legal profession. That is something that is near and dear to my heart as an attorney, and knowing that that it is possible for them to find a path that removes them from the sort of the stereotypical things when we think about lawyers, right? So if they can find more joy, more passion, a better balance in their lives, they can then take that back to their practice and not be what people think of when they think of attorneys.
Yes, exactly.
So,
well, thank you. This has been delightful.
For that work. Thank you for that work, and thank you for stopping in and joining. And thank you for watching this interview with Ashley. We will put her contact information in the comments, and if you are an attorney or someone in a profession, legal, medical, accounting, others that could use her services, feel free to give her a call or contact her. So thank you again for joining us, and until next time, have a great rest of your day. Take care.